Scene 4, several weeks later, a drawing room at Windsor. It is raining outside.
It's gone 3, Dr. Reed. He's late.
Possibly held up by some duty, Mrs. Phipps. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
But there is an insolence about him. I've marked it several times.
Well, insolence I can live with. It's the ghost of John Brown that bothers me.
No, well, you surely don't think...
Well, I merely note the symptoms. A new servant arrives, shows he isn't afraid of her, and Her Majesty's heart rate escalates. Well, she's breathless. She doesn't sleep.
Could it not be the natural excitement of the Jubilee? Her busy schedule and the emotions brought on by the love of her subjects?
Well, I hope you're right.
So do I. At least John Brown was close to the Queen's own age. But this boy is a child. And John Brown, for all of his coarse ways, was at least a...
You sent for me, Dr. Reed?
No, please, don't be concerned. There's nothing amiss. On the contrary, I understand, Mrs. Phipps, that Abdul is getting on extremely well.
That's correct, sir.
And you're adjusting to our autumn? Of course, you two have your monsoon seasons. Ours, I'm afraid, lasts from now until June.
Yes, sir. The work, of course, is very different from my duties in Agra, when I held a clerical...
Yeah, I've no doubt. But you're learning fast, and you've already earned favourable comments from the Queen. In fact, I gather she's made a particular request of you.
Her Majesty asked that I might teach her Hindustani, sir.
Indeed. And consequently, you suggested to Mrs. Phipps that Muhammad serves the princesses at tea tomorrow, whilst you deliver your first lesson.
I've discussed it with Muhammad, sir, who's happy to serve.
Yes, I'd recommend, however, that unless Her Majesty brings it up again, this is not a project to pursue.
If I may ask why, sir?
Well, the Queen, whilst possessing an exceptional intellect, is by her own admission not a natural student. Well, isn't there a charming anecdote, Mrs. Phipps?
She often tells with great amusement how she was so unwilling to learn to read and so impossible to teach that her tutor, the Reverend Davis, devised a game. He'd write words on little cards and hide them around the gardens that Her Majesty might find them and thus build her vocabulary. For years the gardeners at Kensington Palace might find cat and mat buried in the royal hydrangeas.
But this was in her childhood, Mrs. Phipps.
Well, yes, but I feel that...
When I was a small boy, perhaps I used to tear wings from flies in an attempt to understand the mechanics of flight.
Oh, really, Abdul, we hardly need to know
I
about
only
each
mean
other.
that people change, Mrs. Phipps. Perhaps Her Majesty has too. She's most eager for me to teach her.
Her Majesty has many whims and a remarkable energy to pursue them. Her capacity for work is endless, and her close advisers, such as Mrs. Phipps and I, are obliged to prevent her from taking on too much. She isn't a young woman. She needs her rest.
My teaching will be gentle, sir.
Now, Abdul, you mustn't contradict the doctor.
Added to which it seems unjust for Muhammad to take on your duties. You say he's content to serve in your place, but this sort of shift in responsibility, well, it invariably leads to tension.
Muhammad's my friend. He'd tell me if he didn't like it.
Nevertheless, you must observe the hierarchy of the household, if you are to be a part of.
Surely all men strive to rise in status, sir, to achieve promotion or a greater salary, or more respect.
I think the doctor hardly has to answer such questions about
It's an intelligent point. But most men are not in the service of Her Royal Highness. These matters are the Queen's decision, and in all decisions we defer to her.
The Queen's decision is to learn Urdu, sir. I received this letter from Her Majesty this morning.
And therefore please arrange for Muhammad to serve tea to the princesses tomorrow afternoon.
If it is sunny, she writes, she would like to have her lesson in the garden.